pedals, 4 rides, 5 snares, man. A roto-tom rack. And it's all mounted on my infamous quadruple kick drum system. Hey! You didn't touch my drum set! Hey, knock it off!
And then after 1 year, my second year at Berklee of studying with Alan Dawson, then I went back to Gary Chaffee.
Right.
And at that point, Vinnie Colauita had just started Berklee. So Vinnie's 2 years younger than me, and I had met him in the summer break. And I was on tour with a big band made up of mainly guys that had used to play with Buddy Rich and Maynard Ferguson, and the band leader was Lin Biviano. And if you ever there's a great Buddy Rich album called Rich in London.
Right.
It's recorded live at Ronnie Scott's. Well, that band is pretty much Lin Biviano was the lead trumpet player. John DeFlon was on trumpet. Wayne Naus, Greg Hopkins, and most of that band became the Lin Biviano band. So I was the drummer in that band when I was 19. So we were touring around the East Coast and the Midwest, and we played a gig in Brownsville, Pennsylvania, which is near Pittsburgh. And I was 19, and this young 17-year-old kid that had just graduated high school was Vinnie. And so he just came up and introduced himself as a young drummer that's going to go to Berklee next year. And I heard you go to Berklee, so maybe I'll see you there. And liked what you did tonight. He was very just friendly and just somebody that a drummer that you meet like that. And so I says, great. So then next September came around, and I was at Berklee, and he was now, a freshman at Berklee. And as we met each other and just hung out, and then one day, he goes, come to my dorm room and we'll practice, So I did, and then I noticed, he was working on the exact same lessons I was from Chaffee. And then we really hit it off.
Oh, cool.
And so then we went to Gary and asked him if we could, instead of each taking a 30-minute lesson, could we take a 1-hour lesson together? So he said, yeah, that's fine, let's do that. And Gary used to have 2 drum sets, bass drum to bass drum. And so we would just sit down and he'd give us the material and we'd work on it in the lesson. And then we'd practice a lot. And as it turned out, his mother moved from Pittsburgh to Hyannis, Massachusetts, which is on Cape Cod. And my parents owned a house in Chatham, Mass, on Cape Cod, about 15 miles away, or 10 miles. I'm not too far, like a 20-minute drive. And so we all that school year we worked on material with Gary, and then during the summer we could practice during the summer in my basement. So we really spent a lot of time hanging out and then going to gigs. And that was a pretty important part of my development, I have to say, because, I had somebody that we could really relate to drumming in a very similar way, had similar influences. And then we'd go see Billy Cobham's band and sit in the front row and kind of freak out, this is unbelievable. Because Billy Cobham, I bring that up because he was a game changer, when he showed up on the scene. He really changed everything. And then, Tony Williams' New Lifetime with Alan Holdsworth, we'd go and see that and be kind of freaked out by it, but then really discuss it and try to work out a lot with what they were doing. So it's like a little laboratory of really coming up with these, seeing what the innovations were at that time and then trying to incorporate them into our playing. Another big one was Steve Gadd during those years. And, we heard that he played once a week at McKell's at this club in New York with a band called Stuff. So we got on a bus and came down to New York and saw Stuff at McKell's. And it was double drums with Chris Parker and Steve Gadd, So we do that and took the bus to New York once to see a Herbie Hancock concert that had Tony Williams playing it was called V.S.O.P. Then Freddie Hubbard on trumpet, Ron Carter on bass, Herbie Hancock, Wayne Shorter. So, there was a good amount of development. And then, of course, there were a lot of other very good drummers at Berklee during that time that were also inspirational, and friends like JR Robinson was there during that time, Kenwood Dennard, Casey Scheuerell, a lot of good players, and a lot of guys that are good players that are not well known at this time, but were still good players, and so it was an exciting time.